Our reading today is a poem So the Weight of This Country Does Not Crush You, by Yosimar Reyes, a queer undocumented immigrant born in Guerrero, Mexico, and raised in East San Jose. Yosimar's words: "Some days you may wake up sad, some days you may wake up frustrated, some days you may wake up tired, some days you may wonder if it's worth it. Some days you may question your own growth. Some days you may think on how immense the world is, to be caged in this country, to be subjugated to all this abuse. Some days you just want to breathe, and baby, I am here to remind you to sit in those moments, to sit in that whirlpool. Know that there are people like me picking up the load when you can't. There are people like me, so the weight of this country does not crush you. That there are people like you who will fight when I can't. We will take turns, pushing against these walls. I got your back and you got mine, and in the scheme of things, does anything else matter? And even if our fight is unfruitful, we will depart with our dignity intact. We will depart knowing that this country is losing a prized possession. This country is losing the gift of our resilience. We will watch them as they tear into each other's skins and thank heavens we never turned into beasts like them." So this sermon series of spiritual geographies has been a neat place for me to put my brain as a person who does anti-deportation organizing nationally and locally during this very intense and heartbreaking time. It's given me a chance to research deserts and swamps and the Midwest of my childhood. And today, right here, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Eastern Massachusetts. And there's a lot that could be said and has been said about the history of this land, this building, this congregation, and the many souls who've come through it. And today I'm actually thinking about something that I really, really rarely think about for someone who's lived in Boston for 15 years: the Revolutionary War. My partner, Oscar, lived in Providence for many years, and he introduced me to a thing brand new to me called Gaspee Days. Is anyone familiar? Do we have Rhode Islanders here? Okay, I also did not know. A bit of a controversial topic between Massachusetts and Rhode Islander people, I learned. Gaspee Days is this very raucous, patriotic parade and festival celebrating this is where the controversy comes in, what Rhode Islanders are very quick to remind me as a Massachusetts resident, that the American Revolution actually began in 1772 when a group attacked the Royal Navy schooner the Gaspee in Narragansett Bay, shot the captain, wounded many of the people who worked on the ship, burned and sank the ship. The group of people who burned the Gaspee was led by the merchant John Brown, and according to history, he brought 8 boatloads of armed, reputable citizens who were tired of harassment by the British ship, the Gaspee. They gathered at Sabine's Tavern in Providence, muffled their oars, and rowed the 6 miles to where the Gaspee was. A letter from the Rhode Island Governor Wanton at the time to Lieutenant Dunstan, commander of the Gaspee, reads, "A considerable number of the inhabitants of this colony have complained to me of your having, in a most illegal and unwarrantable manner, interrupted their trade by searching and detaining every little packet boat plying between the several towns." And after the Gaspee was set fire and sunk, despite many British efforts, those who sunk the ship were never punished. And this attack on one of the British ships is what we now might understand as an act of war, perhaps some would say just war, oppressed colonized people fighting for freedom and liberty from British Empire. It's so striking to me that Gaspee Day is no different from many celebrations of July 4th, or I anticipate the coming 250th anniversaries of the battles of Lexington and Concord in a few weeks, honor the unequivocal righteousness of these acts of rebellion. But I can't help but wonder if in their own day, those acts were actually seen as such unequivocal, righteous acts of rebellion. They seem sort of scrappy, unrespectable, marginalized. These random guys gathering in a tavern to kill the captain of a British ship and burn it and sink it. And then in Lexington and Concord, a totally unofficial rogue militia of hundreds hiding ammunition and weapons in secret caches in the Lexington Green. And I can never quite get my head around what feels like this profound hypocrisy of those who cheer the Revolutionary War and malign, or worse, criminalize acts of contemporary protest. Our signs, our marches, our speeches. And yes, even sometimes graffiti or broken windows or police cars set afire. Whether or not a tactic of setting something on fire is strategic or moral, it does seem that the logic of burning a cop car is a similar logic to the burning of the Gaspee. Thank you, Mayreed, for the invitation to learn more about the whole person who is Rumesa as she fights for her freedom from inside ICE detention. At the protest calling for the freedom for Rumesa in Powder House Park in Somerville, the person next to me had a sign that said, "One day everyone will have been against this." We hope. And each day, the tour guides of the Freedom Trail and the Duck Tours, which I have, after many, many, many years of living here, gone on with visiting friends who wanted to go, and the million historical plaques we all know about here in Cambridge and in surrounding greater Boston, tell the story of the Revolutionary War so often as one of good and evil, black and white. I feel like maybe it is actually much more complicated, that in moments of great political meaning that are still unfolding, what protest is considered legitimate is greatly contested, judged, and real human lives bear the weight, the costs, and the consequences. The Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement investigations, and I hesitate to say these words aloud to give them weight, but I do think it's important to know what they say, said that Rumesa engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization that relishes the killing of Americans. That's their direct quote. What we know is that Rumesa co-authored an op-ed in her student paper. We know these labels of criminal and terrorist are invented ones. Their roots in the control of poor people, laboring people, their roots in colonialism and slavery, and the exploitation of this land and lands across the world, and the exploitation of people for the wealth and power of empires. Our opening words by the Potawatomi botanist Robin Wall Kimmerer, to become native, to become naturalized to land, is to give our gifts here, to meet our responsibilities here. This church, though not this building, was founded years before the burning of the Gaspee. And while its theology at that point in time is some ways very different than what it is now, I am wondering, what is our Unitarian Universalist theology when it is naturalized to our political moment, to this place and time. I'm thinking of that word, unity, Unitarian, a theological commitment that I do believe we need now more than ever. And don't get me wrong, a lot of harm is done in the name of unity. And I'm not talking about neutrality or compromise. I am talking about a unity of humanity that does not throw anyone under the bus. It does not mean that we allow for power over, but a unity of humanity that says that everyone deserves a life of well-being and thriving, that communities deserve freedom to live, whether we are students or elders, whether we have been targeted by the criminal system, whatever language we speak, wherever we choose to make a home. And it demands that any who threaten that vision be transformed. As a person who spends almost all of my time thinking about the struggle for justice for immigrants in the United States, I've been very aware of the narrative that has shifted aggressively in the past couple years. Less than 5 years ago, it was almost mainstream to call for the defunding of police departments, to uplift Black and Latina and indigenous intellect, artistic, historical, and political presences, for an end to the border wall, for pathways to citizenship. I don't need to tell you this, but I think it's important to say out loud because it can feel like how it is now is how it's always been. But things have moved, especially on the narrative front, very quickly. And now we find ourselves debating whether it's okay to deport that person to a El Salvadorian supermax prison because they are really a gang member or not. And maybe inadvertently perpetuating the narrative that if they were a gang member, then it would be okay for them to be there. We find ourselves shouting that, well, she owned a restaurant or he worked in a factory and so should be safe from deportation. Again, maybe inadvertently saying that if someone just stayed home and watched Netflix and ate Cheetos, as perhaps many of us, including myself, have done at different stages of life, then deportation would be okay. And we know all too well that just a mention of Palestine, or in the case of Dr. Badar Suri, who now, like Rumesa, faces deportation and is detained, being married to a Palestinian person, means that they can use the word terrorist. I think we know how harmful the idea of a perfect victim can be. And we don't believe that anyone should be judged. But somehow still, this idea of a perfect narrative, a perfect victim, gains traction in the narrative. Because no one should die at the hands of police, even if they did, just like me, watch a lot of Netflix and eat a lot of Cheetos, or like me, were an imperfect parent, or had trouble holding down a job, or made mistakes. And no one should be disappeared by ICE, whether they're an incredible scholar like Rumesa, or someone who, I don't know, used the same kind of drugs that celebrities widely publicly use, or maybe had a gun like those pardoned for their violence on January 6th. As Unitarian Universalists, I think our voices and theology to be naturalized to this moment in time are needed. We need to be the ones to remind ourselves and our wider movements that love at the center means no one is cast out, that interdependence is for everyone, that we refuse to believe that the safety of one community requires the oppression of another. We win nothing when we let ourselves be divided and conquered. Yosumar's words, I got your back and you got mine, and in the scheme of things, does anything else matter? Those merchants, so irritated by being harassed by the British who burned down the Gaspee, terrorists or revolutionaries, heroes or villains, probably some of each, and a lot of just imperfect humans in a random situation. What protest is legitimate and who is worthy of saving looks so tidy in the eye of the writers of history. But we're right here. We're amidst it all in the messiness, where in our desperation to save ourselves and those we care about, it can be tempting to slice and dice humanity, to bargain and negotiate who is worthy, who is disposable. I get told in my work all the time that it is not politically viable to stand for all people, to be for all people. That we must, especially in moments of crisis, do what is politically viable. But gratefully, in addition to being an immigration justice organizer, I am also a person of faith. And I get to do things not just because they are winnable, but because they are right. I had the honor of hearing the Reverend Munther Isaac of the Christmas Lutheran Church of Bethlehem, Palestine, and author of Christ in the Rubble and leader of the Christ at the Checkpoint movement, speak here in Cambridge last week. And someone in the audience asked him, how can we make the struggle for a free Palestine one that is profitable? Because when injustice is unprofitable is when it stops. And he said that while he understood the importance of economic strategies, he was a pastor, and he would continue to assert the moral and ethical arguments. When abolitionists asserted that chattel slavery in the United States was unethical, they were told that was not a politically viable position, that there was simply no way to transition an economic system based on enslaving people for their labor, to transition the economies of tobacco and cotton and other industries built on that model. But the moral vision forced the economic reality to transform. And in this moment, there are a million arguments about what is rational and logical and politically viable. And I'm glad that all those people are in their lanes. But I feel like my and our role as people of faith is to be unapologetic, visionary, and clear about our shared humanity, about that unity, and our absolute refusal to carve anyone out. Another thing that Reverend Isaac said, he said, solidarity is costly. And we know that. And we feel the weight anew, many of us in different ways, depending on our vulnerabilities and positions. I'm sure right here in this community, there are jobs that have been lost out of solidarity, relationships lost, stability lost, fear of what could be lost. I do not say any of this lightly. All of us are being crushed in some way by some weight, and to say to someone who's being crushed, you must also care about the person next to you and the weight that is crushing them, is an impossible thing. But as Yosimar says, without costly solidarity, we lose our own humanity. We turn to beasts. The last remaining ICE jail in Massachusetts is in Plymouth, home to where the Pilgrims first landed. And it is such a strange thing that where genocide in some ways began by European immigrants, there is this other war on more recent immigrants, most of them themselves indigenous to the countries that they came from. Because the contract with ICE exists at this jail, many people can be arrested. There is a place nearby to cage them. I would encourage folks to learn about the dignity, not deportations legislation that would end all ICE contracts in the state and prevent new ones. But it is somehow heartbreakingly fitting that the place that we go for a day of mourning is also the place where violence against communities of color and indigenous people now continues to this day. For millennia, before this area was known as Newtown and now Cambridge, it was called Enmokagan. In the Algonquin Natick dialect, that means fishing weir or beaver dam or place of curing fish, depending on how you do the translation. Fayetteville Square, which is where the Middle East is in Central Square, was an oyster market. Dr. Wall Kimmerer's words, being naturalized to a place means to live as if the land feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, to build your body and fill your spirit. We who are not native to this land are so far from being naturalized to Enmokagan land. And I fear that these words are so far from what is true. And each day, history is unfolding. We don't have the luxury of looking back to see what they will say in 15 years or 20 or 50 about these moments. Who were supposedly criminals or terrorists, who might be heroes. But I find some balm in thinking of the land that has been here for a long time, from even before the oyster market, before the founding of this congregation, before the burning and sinking of the Gaspee. And maybe, as long as it is here, there is a hope that we could become the humans who are naturalized to it, who care for it, as if our lives depend on it, because they do. My father and my husband are both naturalized, as they say, in a different way. And they've both been through so many moments in that journey, once living outside of the US with no expectation of ever living anywhere else, and then coming here, uncertainty, green cards, and then that word, naturalized. Their journeys are a reminder to me of how little I actually know about the future, good or bad. How much can change over the arc of even just a part of a lifetime. To go from wholly of one place to naturalized in another. Our Unitarian Universalist theology must be naturalized to this time and place and reality. Meaning all when we say all, meaning love at the center for everyone when we say love at the center. And though it feels far off, I take strength from those who say maybe it is not so far away. But I do believe that as people of faith, it is actually our job to believe in what we can't see or touch. A world where we live as if our children's futures matter and our ancestors lie in this ground. A world made of our unwillingness to cast anyone out, to surrender the unity of humanity. A world that takes our costly solidarity. A world where the land feeds us and we give our gifts and we meet our responsibilities. Where the weight of this country does not crush you or you or you or me or anyone at all. May it be so.